The Nowata Methodist Church is happy to produce a lot of different content for the edification of Christ's church throughout the world. This daily segment that you're listening to right now corresponds with the Daily Bible Reading Challenge, which is hosted by Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. If you want to download the list of readings that they publish for yourself or learn more about this challenge, this initiative, go to biblereading.christkirk.com. I'm Jeffrey Rickman. I'm the pastor here in Nowata, and I read from the Berean Standard Bible, which you can also find at berean.bible. Consider subscribing to this podcast to be a part of this daily effort to grow in familiarity with and love of God's holy word. Let's dive in for today. Hey friends, it's time to read scripture again. I hope you're well. I hope the Lord has been speaking to you as we've made our way through these scriptures together, and I hope you look forward to this as much as I do. It's just a good daily discipline, and it's great to refresh ourselves if we know what's in here. It's great to familiarize ourselves if we had no idea what's in here. I saw an article showing that Bibles are increasing in sales in America by 20% due to first-time Bible buyers, which is, of course, a very promising sign. So anyway, if you're one of those new Bible buyers, then God bless you in this. All right, let's get into the scriptures. We're going to pick up in 2 Samuel today. So we're in chapter 1, obviously. Let's attend upon God's word together. After the death of Saul, David returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. On the third day, a man with torn clothes and dust on his head arrived from Saul's camp. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him homage. "Where have you come from?" David asked. "I have escaped from the Israelite camp," he replied. "What was the outcome?" David asked. "Please, tell me." "The troops fled from the battle," he replied. "Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead." Then David asked the young man who had brought him the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa," he replied, "and there was Saul leaning on his spear with the chariots and the cavalry closing in on him. When he turned around and saw me, he called out, and I answered, 'Here I am.' 'Who are you?' he asked. So I told him, 'I am an Amalekite.' Then he begged me, 'Stand over me and kill me, for agony has seized me, but my life still lingers.' So I stood over him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band that was on his arm, and I have brought them here to my Lord." Then David took hold of his own clothes and tore them, and all the men who were with him did the same. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan and for the people of the Lord and the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And David inquired of the young man who had brought him the report, "Where are you from?" "I am the son of a foreigner," he answered. "I am an Amalekite." So David asked him, "Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David summoned one of the young men and said, "Go execute him." So the young man struck him down, and he died. For David had said to the Amalekite, "Your blood be on your own head, because your own mouth has testified against you, saying, 'I killed the Lord's anointed.'" Then David took up this lament for Saul and his son Jonathan, and he ordered that the sons of Judah be taught the song of the bow. It is written in the book of Jasher, "Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, and the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. O mountains of Gilboa, may you have no dew or rain. no fields yielding offerings of grain. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, no longer anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not retreat, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and delightful in life, were not divided in death. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and luxury, who decked your garments with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in the thick of battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were delightful to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war have perished. 2 Samuel chapter 2. Sometime later, David inquired of the Lord, "Should I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" "Go up," the Lord answered. Then David asked, "Where should I go?" "To Hebron," replied the Lord. So David went there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also took the men who were with him, each of his household, and they settled in the towns near Hebron. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead to tell them, "The Lord bless you, because you showed this kindness to Saul your Lord when you buried him. Now may the Lord show you loving devotion and faithfulness, and I will also show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and courageous, for though Saul your Lord is dead, the house of Judah has anointed me as their king." Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, took Saul's son Ishbosheth, moved him to Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, and Benjamin, over all Israel. Saul's son Ishbosheth was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned for 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. And the length of time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. One day Abner, son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, marched out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. So Joab, son of Zeruiah, along with the servants of David, marched out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. And the 2 camps took up positions on opposite sides of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let us have the young men get up and compete before us." "Let them get up," Joab replied. So they got up and were counted off, 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his sword into his opponent's side, and they all fell together. So this place, which is in Gibeon, is called Helkath Hazurim. The battle that day was intense, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated by the servants of David. The 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was fleet of foot like a wild gazelle, and he chased Abner, not turning to the right or to the left in his pursuit. And Abner glanced back and said, "Is that you, Asahel?" "It is," Asahel replied. So Abner told him, Turn to your right or to your left. Seize one of the young men and take his equipment for yourself." But Asahel would not stop chasing him. Once again, Abner warned Asahel, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How could I show my face to your brother Joab?" But Asahel refused to turn away. So Abner thrust the butt of his spear into his stomach, and it came out his back, and he fell dead on the spot. And every man paused when he came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. By sunset they had gone as far as the hill of Ammah opposite Giah on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. The Benjamites rallied to Abner, formed a single unit, and took their stand atop a hill. Then Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Do you not realize that this will only end in bitterness? How long before you tell the troops to stop pursuing their brothers?" "As surely as God lives," Joab replied, "if you had not spoken up, the troops would have continued pursuing their brothers until morning." So Joab blew the ram's horn, and all the troops stopped. They no longer pursued Israel or continued to fight. And all that night Abner and his men marched through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, marched all morning, and arrived at Mahanaim. When Joab returned from pursuing Abner, he gathered all the troops. In addition to Asahel, 19 of David's servants were missing. But they had struck down 360 Benjamites who were with Abner. Later they took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb in Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men marched all night and reached Hebron at daybreak. 2 Samuel chapter 3. Now the war between the house of Saul and the house of David was protracted, and David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second was Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. His third was Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of King Talmai of Geshur. His fourth was Adonijah, the son of Haggith. His fifth was Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And his sixth was Ithream, by David's wife Eglah. These sons were born to David in Hebron. During the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner had continued to strengthen his position in the house of Saul. Meanwhile, Saul had a concubine named Ritzpah, the daughter of Aiah. So Ishbosheth questioned Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" Abner was furious over Ishbosheth's accusation. "Am I the head of a dog that belongs to Judah?" he asked. "All this time I have been loyal to the house of your father Saul, to his brothers, and to his friends. I have not delivered you into the hand of David, but now you accuse me of wrongdoing with this woman. May God punish Abner, and ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord has sworn to him. To transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and Judah from Dan to Beersheba." And for fear of Abner, Ishbosheth did not dare to say another word to him. Then Abner sent messengers in his place to say to David, "To whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and surely my hand will be with you to bring all Israel over to you." "Good," replied David. "I will make a covenant with you. But there is one thing I require of you. Do not appear before me unless you bring Saul's daughter Michal when you come to see me." Then David sent messengers to say to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, Give me back my wife, Michal, whom I betrothed to myself, for 100 Philistine foreskins. So Ishbosheth sent and took Michal from her husband Paltiel, son of Laish. Her husband followed her, weeping all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, Go back. So he returned home. Now Abner conferred with the elders of Israel and said, In the past you sought David as your king. Now take action, because the Lord has said to David, Through my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hands of the Philistines and of all their enemies. Abner also spoke to the Benjamites and went to Hebron to tell David all that seemed good to Israel and the whole house of Benjamin. When Abner and 20 of his men came to David at Hebron, David held a feast for them. Then Abner said to David, Let me go at once, and I will gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may rule over all that your heart desires. So David dismissed Abner, and he went in peace. Just then David's soldiers and Joab returned from a raid, bringing with them a great plunder. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, because David had sent him on his way in peace. When Joab and all his troops arrived, he was informed, Abner, son of Ner, came to see the king, who sent him on his way in peace. So Joab went to the king and said, What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you dismiss him? Now he is getting away. Surely you realize that Abner, son of Ner, came to deceive you and to track your movements and all that you were doing. As soon as Joab had left David, he sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David was unaware of it. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab pulled him aside into the gateway, as if to speak to him privately, and there Joab stabbed him in the stomach. So Abner died on account of the blood of Joab's brother, Asahel. Afterward David heard about this and said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May it whirl over the heads of Joab and the entire house of his father, and may the house of Joab never be without one having a discharge or skin disease, or one who leans on a staff, or falls by the sword, or lacks food. Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle at Gibeon. Then David ordered Joab and all the people with him, Tear your clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourn before Abner. And King David himself walked behind the funeral bier. When they buried Abner in Hebron, the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb, and all the people wept. And the king sang this lament for Abner. Should Abner die the death of a fool? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As a man falls before the wicked, so also you fell. And all the people wept over him even more. Then all the people came and urged David to eat something while it was still day, but David took an oath, saying, May God punish me, and ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun sets. All the people took note and were pleased. In fact, everything the king did pleased them. So on that day all the troops and all Israel were convinced that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, son of Ner. Then the king said to his servants, Do you not realize that a great prince has fallen today in Israel? And I am weak this day, though anointed as king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too fierce for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil. 2 Samuel chapter 4. Now when Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel was dismayed. Saul's sons had 2 men who were leaders of raiding parties. One was named Baanah and the other Rechab. They were sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite of the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is considered part of Benjamin because the Beerothites fled to Gittaim and have lived there as foreigners to this day. And Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the report about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she was hurrying to escape, he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. Now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, set out and arrived at the house of Ishbosheth in the heat of the day, while the king was taking his midday nap. They entered the interior of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away. They had entered the house while Ishbosheth was lying on his bed, and having stabbed and killed him, they beheaded him, took his head, and traveled all night by way of the Arabah. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy who sought your life. Today the Lord has granted vengeance to my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." But David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all distress, when someone told me, 'Look, Saul is dead,' and thought he was a bearer of good news, I seized him and put him to death at Ziklag. That was his reward for his news. How much more, when wicked men kill a righteous man in his own house and on his own bed, shall I not now require his blood from your hands and remove you from the earth?" So David commanded his young men, and they killed Rechab and Baanah. They cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. 2 Samuel chapter 5. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "Here we are, your own flesh and blood. Even in times past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel out and brought them back. And to you the Lord said, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will be ruler over them.'" So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, where King David made with them a covenant before the Lord, and they anointed him king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. Now the king and his men marched to Jerusalem against the Jebusites who had inhabited the land. The Jebusites said to David, "You will never get in here. Even the blind and lame can repel you." For they thought, "David cannot get in here." Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, that is, the city of David. On that day, he said, "Whoever attacks the Jebusites must use the water shaft to reach the lame and blind who are despised by David. That is why it is said, 'The blind and the lame will never enter the palace.'" So David took up residence in the fortress and called it the city of David. He built it up all the way around from the supporting terraces inward. And David became greater and greater, for the Lord God of hosts was with him. Now Hiram king of Tyre sent envoys to David, along with cedar logs, carpenters, and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. And David realized that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people, Israel. After he had arrived from Hebron, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of the children born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphelet. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they all went in search of him. But David learned of this and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, "Should I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand?" "Go," replied the Lord, "for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hand." So David went to Baal-perazim, where he defeated the Philistines, and said, "Like a bursting flood, the Lord has burst out against my enemies before me." So he called that place Baal-perazim. There the Philistines abandoned their idols, and David and his men carried them away. Once again the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, who answered, "Do not march straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the balsam trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, move quickly, because this will mean that the Lord has marched out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines." So David did as the Lord had commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. All right, that concludes our time in 2 Samuel today. Now we just have Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle in my soul with sorrow in my heart each day? How long will my enemy dominate me? Consider me and respond, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, lest I sleep in death. Lest my enemies say, "I have overcome him," and my foes rejoice when I fall. But I have trusted in your loving devotion. My heart will rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. All right, Dave's in charge now, and it's going pretty well. Took over Jerusalem. Couldn't help but notice it was referring to Abigail, and of course we heard the story of Abigail a few days ago whenever she saved her stupid husband Nabal's life by interceding with David. There's a recent controversy around Douglas Wilson, whose church, Christ Church, put together this reading list that we're following, this Bible reading plan. Apparently, in some of their literature or in a conversation he had with his daughters, they said that a righteous woman will behave as Abigail and disobey her husband in any number of affairs. I'm not going to pretend to have read a whole lot about it. I know it's a headline. I know I basically understood this picture rightly. So just to say, there are lots of different ways to interpret these Old Testament stories, and it's just hard to know the right one all the time. So anyway, if you struggle to know how to apply all of these stories perfectly, well, then you're in good company. I would consider myself part of that company, but there is a lot of really good stuff here. So keep mining that field. There's more treasure here than we're ever going to be able to get in one lifetime. But let's try. Okay, we'll conclude for today, and I'll see you tomorrow.